out there. Welcome back to the Phantoms Fanatic YouTube channel. I am back with a long-awaited Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom review, released in 1984, starring Harrison Ford, Kate Capshaw, Ke Huy Quan, Amish Puri, Dan Aykroyd, and Roshan Seth. And it was directed by Steven Spielberg. This movie is obviously the sequel, or I should rather say prequel, to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is also my second of my in-depth movie review series, and yeah, pretty much what these are is just me going into more in-depth into the films that I am reviewing, and I will include clips and stuff so you guys get my full opinion on the movie. Temple of Doom takes place a full year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1935. Obviously, we follow Indiana Jones once again in 1935, a full year before the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and in this film, in the beginning, he is at a nightclub in Shanghai, but due to the botched sale, he then has to fight his way out of this club, taking along with him the dancing, singing actress performer lady Willie, played by Kate Capshaw, and he, with his sidekick Short Round, escape on a plane, but due to the fact that the plane was owned by the people he was escaping from, he ends up crashing in remote India. They come across their remote village full of starving villagers where they see him as a helper from their god to retrieve their sacred stones that were taken by this cult that resides at the titular Temple of Doom. And Indiana Jones, with his two compatriots, Short Round and Willie, must go up against the evil Molar Ram, the leader of the cult of Kali Ma. And you get a very original sequel, but probably the weakest of the original trilogy, comparatively to Last Crusade and Raiders of the Lost Ark. The thing that I always give Temple of Doom over Crystal of Skull, and even over Last Crusade, even though I like Last Crusade more than Temple of Doom, it is one of the most original sequels that I have seen in a while. Obviously, this time around, we do not have the Nazis. Neither we did in Crystal of Skull, but that movie... yeah, this time we don't have the Nazis around. They decide to tell a completely different story without Marcus Brody, without Sala, without any of those characters. And they decide to introduce a new cast of people, still led by Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. But yeah, they decide to tell a new story that completely has no connections to anything of the biblical relations like the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail, and they don't include the Nazis at all. And this time it is just the cult of, I think, Kali Ma is what it is called, as the main villains, and obviously the cult's leader, Mola Ram, who I also think is a very good stand-in for a villain in this one. So yeah, as I said, I really appreciate that they did try to do something different with this film. They tried to change it up by having a different character relationship with Indy and the love interest, and by changing it up by having a different sidekick like Sala, but a very different approach to it, such as Short Round. So yeah, where I think Temple of Doom, it definitely does have the weakest story out of the original trilogy, because compared to the build-up of the Holy Grail and the connection that Indy has with his father in that film, and the whole Ark of the Covenant build-up and opening, the Shankara stones in this, I wouldn't say are very good MacGuffins for Indy to go after. What I like what they do with the Shankara stones is that they affect they affect this village that Indy comes across, which at first he doesn't care to help them. He just wants to go. They think that he's like a sign from their god, that he fell out of the sky to come help them. But he's like, no, that's not true. Can I just have a guide to this city so I can go? But then what I like what they do with this is once one of the children of their village escapes from the Temple of Doom, because the cult is using the children at the Temple of Doom to make them mine and look for the last two Shankara stones, he finds a little pamphlet thing, like a little parchment, that then shows him and tells him that the Shankara stones are actually very valuable and would grant, like, power or wealth. So then he decides to go after them. And I like what they do with his character in this with that, because it's kind of a bit of growth for him before the events of Raiders, because he still has darker tones to his character, because you have a scene, the opening scene, when the people he's trying to make a deal with this artifact so he can get this diamond, they try to double cross him, so then he threatens Willie, the random singer who's just an innocent bystander. And I like that moment. The fact that it still shows him as a selfish character. It kind of shows him after the events of this film how he's grown, especially when we reach Raiders. That's what I like. And the reason why I like it so much is when he goes to the Temple of Doom, he's just looking for the Shankara stones. He doesn't care about saving these people. He just wants to kind of grab them, to take them, to put in a museum and stuff like that. But after, for one, he gets possessed by this liquid that the cult makes him drink, and the fact that he sees the kids getting enslaved, he then, when he, like, gets unpossessed and gets the upper hand on the cult again, he says,
right, all of us.
Given enough build-up to where when the titular, like, cult is revealed, and you get that scene of Mola Ram Kali Maing that guy's heart out, it is a really good payoff to the intensity built up, because John Williams' score in this one takes a lot more of a darker tone to it, and I really enjoy his score in this. It's probably my favorite out of all of the Indiana Jones movies, because it's so much different than the other ones, and I really enjoy that. And when you have that scene, I always like to imagine he rips out the guy's heart, then the guy's heart is the guy who has his heart taken out. I was like, wait, I'm still alive? Will I ever die? And Mola Ram's like, well, I didn't know if that would actually work. I'm surprised that worked. Good luck. He's like, will I ever die? Will I ever die? I always like to imagine that. But I really enjoy the darker tone in this film that it does set up, especially in scenes like the cult sacrifice, or when Indy comes across like the chopped off fingers ritual thing that scares off the other two people who were guiding them to the Temple of Doom. I enjoy those moments. Or when Indy gets attacked in his room, he then hangs a guy from a ceiling fan. And I'm like, this is why I love Temple of Doom. It takes such a darker tone to things, and it works insanely well for me. And I will say, the action scenes in Temple of Doom and the cinematography, I really enjoy the cinematography of Temple of Doom. It is very different than Raiders. I love all of the redness of, like, when they're in the caves underneath the Temple of Doom, the trap they come across in the bug room, which is a scene that I absolutely fucking hate and love at the same time. But I think all of those, like, the lighting, set design, and costumes of the design of the cult and Mola Ram especially, I love that horned outfit he's wearing, and how their sacrifice room has this awesome statue with the red glow everywhere, and the fact that when you get the Shankara stones near each other, they glow. That is a really cool direction to take things, and I really enjoy the cinematography of this film. The action, I'm pretty mixed on. The first action scene in the club, I don't mind, because it leads to some fun interactions where Indy, like, knocks down that big wheel and he's using it as a shield, and he, like, gets poisoned by the gangsters or whoever those people are that he's trying to make this deal with. And Willie's looking for this diamond that they were going to sell him, so Willie and Indy are both scampering around on the floor looking for the diamond or the cure for the poison. And what I really like is then Indy sees she has the antidote, so then she grabs her and goes out the window to where Short Round in his car says, "Short Round, step on it!" Okie dokie, Dr. Jones, hold on to your potato! Even though Ke Huy Quan would just be seen as the bumbling ethnic sidekick like he kind of was in Goonies, he still genuinely does help a lot in the film, and he gets to drive the car, which is cool. So yeah, that action scene I don't have a problem with, even though Willie makes a dumb decision in that, but I won't talk about that until I talk about the characters in this. But then you have them escaping onto the plane, which is owned by the gangsters or whatever he was trying to make the deal with. And nice try, Lao She! And then the pilots jump out of the plane, leaving Indy with no fuel, and then he somehow has to fly a plane, which he doesn't know how to do, and then There's also 2 steering wheels in the plane, which I'm not a engineer or a pilot, but I feel like 2 steering wheels, you can't really fly a plane like that, but who knows? I could be an idiot. Let me know. But then you then get the ridiculous action moment of Indy jumping out of a plane with an inflatable raft and surviving hitting the ground. Not even hitting the ground, and then he goes off a cliff and hits another patch of ground. And I'm like, no, they would be a red mist on the side of that snowy mountain. They wouldn't survive that shit. And what I thought would have been a better idea is if the plane was like careering near the peak of a mountain, then you have them go off then, so it's like a little jump, even though the G-forces would probably still kill them. It's not as ridiculous as what you get in the final product of the film. And then the effect of the plane exploding isn't the best, but there's plenty of matte screening effects in this that don't work the best. And then it's a bit of a while before you get any action moments until Indy is in his room and then he gets attacked by the one cult member and then he hangs him from the ceiling, which I love. He's hanging from a ceiling fan with Indy's whip and he's like, short round, turn that off to stop it from propelling. I always like that moment. And then you get the bug room, which I hate and love at the same time. The bug room kind of gets at the point where I don't like Willie because she's kind of annoying. But the cinematography and the build-up to what is going on in there and the bug room itself is so fucking creepy and skin-crawling. And I genuinely like the comedic scene there, even though Willie does get on my nerves a bit. She's like, there's 2 bodies in here. And then Indy says when he's gonna get crushed with short round, like, there's gonna be 2 more in here.
There are 2 dead people down here!
There are gonna be 2 dead people in here!
And then when, like, she's struggling to press the button because there's bugs on it, which is a relatable thing, but I just feel like the performance and her over-the-top way of screaming at the top of her lungs really gets at me. But when she's struggling to press it, you then see, like, through a hole Harrison Ford's face, and I think it's his delivery that makes me laugh here.
We are going to die!
And then you get the cult sacrifice scene, which I'm always a big fan of. You then get Indy getting captured, he then gets possessed, and then Shorty, Short Round, his little sidekick, breaks out and then saves the day by snapping Dr. Jones out of the possession to where then Dr. Jones fights back against the cultists and saves Willie, who they are about to have possessed Indy sacrifice her. And I like that action scene, you know, it has a fun, like, little bit where he throws that one, like, guy underneath the cog to stop it from dropping Willie completely into the fire. And then he then says the line where he's like, let's get everybody out of here. He then frees everybody in the mine area, and then he then goes up against the big cultist guy, which is probably my favorite action scene of the movie. And even though I'm gonna have problems with Willie's character, she does help him in this action scene. She, like, gives him stuff to try to hit the big cultist guy with, but then he's getting stunned by the little emperor up top, like, pricking the voodoo doll. So then Shorty, Short Round, then goes up there and starts beating up the kid, and then you get this shot where it's like Indy's doing the same punches against the big cultist guy, and then Shorty is then punching the kid to stop him at the same time. I really enjoy that moment. It's a nice parallel between their characters, and their relationship and their chemistry is probably my favorite part about Temple of Doom, other than the darkerness that this film tries to go for. And yet again, with the action scenes, what I like is we see Indy as a genuine human. He doesn't just instantly John Wick people, like I said in the first review. He takes his time. He has to keep, like, throwing punches back against bigger enemies. And what I love about that scene is he, like, the guy falls and gets himself caught in this, like, spinning cog thing, which then crushes him, but Indy's trying to save him. I just love that moment. As I said, there's a lot of action in Temple of Doom. It keeps the plot going. You never feel boring or lulls, yet again, with exposition. And exposition is delivered in a good way in this, such as the dinner scene where Indy's talking to the Prime Minister and the young Emperor, which I was like, okay, that's a good joke, where, like, Willie's like, I wonder if I can seduce the Emperor to become rich, because that's the thing with Willie. She just wants, like, diamonds and jewelry and stuff like that, and it's like, it's not a bad idea to explore that kind of character, but she also is really annoying at the same time. But when Indy is talking to the Prime Minister about the cult in the Temple of Doom, the scene of Willie and Shorty reacting to the gross dinner foods, such as the snake getting cut open and then eels coming out, or the eyeball stew, or the monkey brain dessert, and it's like, for as much, and I was like, that is yet again a similar thing to the date poisoning scene where it keeps you engaged while still delivering exposition about this cult that existed around the Temple of Doom like 100 years ago, which I really enjoy the fact that this film, yet again, delivers exposition in a good enough way to keep the audience engaged still. And then the other two action scenes of note that I'm going to mention are the minecart chase and the final confrontation with Mola Ram at the bridge on the end. And I don't have a lot to say about these other than the fact that I like that they genuinely are trying something different with the action scenes. The problem that I have with the minecart one is I feel like they are a bit too ambitious with that one, because I like the back and forth between the two carts, the fact that the carts that are chasing them have like guns and stuff and they don't, so Indy just has to like kind of throw rocks or stuff to like knock them off them. The thing is, a lot of the screening effects, yet again, where it's like behind them in the cart and you see in front of them and the moving, it just doesn't look composited right. The parts of those scenes that I do like is the fact that they use miniatures and like dolls for wide shots. I'm like, okay, that works. And it ends with a comedic moment where the lever breaks, so Indy has to use his boot and then it catches on fire. So then he's like, water, water, but then Mola Ram, to try to like drown them to get them dead, he like knocks over this big water thing to then flood the caves. And he's like, ah! And then Indy sees the water and then he starts running for it.
Water! 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 Water!
And yet again, the effect of them staying on the edge of the cliff while the water shoots out of the tunnel, it's an ambitious shot, but it doesn't work the best for me. And then a very similar thing can be said about the end bridge fight between Mola Ram and Indy, because a little action scene that I like, a little moment, is when Indy faces off two cultists with swords and he tries to go for his gun like he did in the first movie, which I didn't mention. And then he's like, okay, then he has to fight them. Then he grabs a sword, runs the other way, starts screaming, and then this happens. Yeah, but that is a comedic moment that I really do like in Temple of Doom. And then, you know, they get on the bridge. Willie is then stopped by Mola Ram, who's on the other side somehow. And he's like, okay. And then he holds the Shankara stones over the edge. He's like, I'll drop them. And Mola Ram's like, well, I can always just grab them. So then Indy cuts the rope, making the bridge fall over to one side of the cliff. And then it's like an action scene where Shorty and Willie are off it's almost like a ladder, and they're off of it, and then one cultist falls, which the effect yet again doesn't look that good, and then Mola Ram tries to Kali Ma Indy's heart out. But the part that I like about this is, one, even though I don't like what they do with his character, that kind of retcons the fact that he's using magic to defeat Mola Ram, where he like casts an enchantment to light up the Shankara stones, catch them on fire, so then Mola Ram falls down and then gets eaten by crocodiles, which again, the effect doesn't look the best, but you know, but he gets the Shankara stone and returns it. And that's all I really have to say about the action in Temple of Doom. It's not bad, and I like that it genuinely keeps moving forward, especially in exposition scenes, especially when you have Mola Ram explaining his motives to Indy, where he's like, I want to take back control of my country from the British, and he's like, that's why I'm collecting the Shankara stones, to bring us wealth and power so we can overpower the British. And I'm like, that's good motives, and I feel like the actor does a good enough job, and the design of Mola Ram I really enjoy, the horns and like the different paint markings on him explaining that. But yeah, the action in Temple of Doom I would say is half and half for me, mainly because I feel like they're over too ambitious in some of them, and there's not like really a huge standout fight scene like there was with the truck chase in Raiders or the mechanic fight in Raiders, but they're not bad action scenes in Temple of Doom. I still like them. And comparatively to Raiders, and I know I compare them a lot, but I also just think that overall the characters in this film are not the greatest in the franchise. One thing that I really enjoy about this film, other than its darker tone, is Indy and Short Round's relationship. I really enjoy Short Round as a character. You know, he genuinely helps Indy out, even though you would think because he's like a kid with a very heavy accent, and the fact that he's kind of played for like the comedic ethnic sidekick like you thought Sala would be. He genuinely helps Indy out, and I really enjoy their character relationship back and forth with each other. Because you get the scene where they're playing cards, and Shorty thoughts that Indy cheats, so Shorty tries to get Indy to admit that he cheated, and he's like, "You owe me 10 cents, Dr. Jones," and then Indy like pulls his wrist up and pulls a card out, and he's like, "Yeah, really? Am I the one cheating?" And I love their relationship. I really enjoy them, and especially in scenes where like Short Round is copying what Indy's doing because he wants to be like him. I enjoy that moment. Especially later on when you get the action scenes, Shorty helps Indy out a lot in the action scenes. He actually is the one to save the day when Indy's possessed, which is some great acting by Harrison Ford when he's laying on that table and he gets possessed. For one, when they're trying to force Indy to drink the liquid, he's saying like, "Spit it out, Dr. Jones, don't swallow it," and then they just force him to swallow it anyways. It still works out for me because he breaks out and tries to help, but he's a little kid going up against fully grown men. But when he's forced to work in the mines, but he like is secretly breaking out with his pick, and then he goes to try to save Indy because he's about to sacrifice Willie the same way that Bolaram Kali mobbed the other motherfucker. And what I like about that is when he's like holding up a torch to try to fight back the other guys, he burns Indy, but while he's like talking to Indy, he's like, "Dr. Jones, I love you." And I was like, "Aw, I like their relationship. I like Indy and Shorty's relationship." And as I said, when he's beating the young Emperor up, you get that shot where they copy each other's moves. But a part that I like about that is like after Indy defeats the big cultist, he then looks at him and goes,
Short Round! Quit fooling around with that kid! Get down the cart, now!
But yeah, I really like Indy and Shorty's relationship, especially when you get Shorty's backstory where like his parents apparently died in like a flood, so then he was just on the streets and he tried to pickpocket Indy once, and then they just became friends because they have kind of that similar like trickster sense to themselves, and I really enjoy that. I like Indy and Short Round's relationship in Temple of Doom. It's probably my second favorite part about this film, other than the darker tone and the cinematography. And as I said, Indy himself in this, it shows how much he has grown once we reach Raiders, how he's more of a sophisticated, like, adventurer than he was back now. But the problem that I have with this film also is that they do retcon the fact that he doesn't believe in magic or anything, because he literally sees a guy rip somebody's heart out, and he even uses magic to defeat Mola Ram at the end. But the character changes when he finally just he saves all of the encaptured kids, and when he's finally at the end and he's talking with Willie, and she's like, "What, you're not going to take the stone for yourself for the power and wealth?" He's like, "It'll just sit in a museum. This place needs it."
What for? They'd just put it in a museum, it'd be another rock collecting dust.
And I was like, I like that moment for his character. Now, I'm going to talk about the big part of Temple of Doom that I do not like. It's Willie. I don't blame Kate Capshaw for this performance. She was probably doing exactly what Steven Spielberg told her to do. But it's like with most action-adventure movies, you always have, like, for comedic effect, you either have the ethnic sidekick or the love interest who kind of is just like, "What's going on here? I really hate this." And especially in that Short Round playing cards with Indy scene, she's freaking out about everything in the jungle, and she is so loud and obnoxious, screaming her lungs out in so many scenes. that she really gets on my nerves. I really do not like Willie that much. She is one of my least favorite parts about Temple of Doom, and I just feel like every single time they try to do a comedic scene with her, it's just not funny to me. I will say, she's not an awful character. As I said, she is kind of the damsel in distress for Indy to save, but as I said, in that one action scene, she generally tries to help Indy. And I will say, a romantic scene that I do like is when, after the dinner scene where Willie didn't eat any of the gross stuff, Indy then comes in with like a bowl of fruit to give her, and then they're having romantic lines back and forth where he's like, "I'll tell you by the morning how I rate you," and then she's like, "You think I'm that easy?" And I was like, okay, I like that scene when they go into the different rooms and they start repeating the same words back and forth, like how they think that both of them are gonna come knocking at their door. I really enjoy that moment. And then a moment that I like is when Indy, after fighting the one guy, moves in and he's like all sweaty and she just thinks he's gonna just have sex with her in the roughest way ever. She like falls over off the edge of her bed. And moments like that, I like her. But overall, she's not as strong as a character as Marion or Indy's father, because that's kind of what I put in that place, because even though he has a love interest in Last Crusade, which is a more interesting idea than what they do in this, it isn't a bad thing. I don't mind Willie overall. But yeah. Anyways, so yeah, that's my opinion on Temple of Doom. I do think that it is a very original sequel, and I like the darker tone moments, even though I do feel like a lot of the goofy comedic edges bring the darker tone down for me. I still enjoy it for how dark and gory a PG movie is. And I really enjoy that this film made history by being one of the films that inspired the PG-13 rule. I do think there are some good character moments between Indy and Short Round. Those two actors have such great chemistry on screen. The villain, yet again, is a good enough villain. I like Mola Ram. He has some decent motivations, and he has a dope-ass design. I really like the cinematography in Temple of Doom, but some character moments retconning Raiders' whole Indy's character, where I felt like there wasn't a beat missed in that film, and the build-up to the Ark of the Covenant. The Shankara Stones, I don't think, have as good of a build-up. They're kind of just rocks, and as a MacGuffin piece, I don't like them as much. And then you have Willie as a character, who I said I'm obviously not the biggest fan of, but other people may think differently, but I definitely recommend Temple of Doom. It's a fun watch. It's a ride that I feel like has a lot of action in it, a lot of darker moments that I think work well enough to where it keeps me engaged throughout, and I will always revisit Temple of Doom for that reason, just because it's such an interesting film when you look back on like the PG rule compared to PG-13, and this film is as gory. This film would be R-rated today. It wouldn't get a PG-13, but that's what I respect about this film. The fact that it's a truly original sequel. Spielberg did something very different with this film, and I respect that. Even though I may not like some of the story or character ideas that they do, it's still well enough done, well enough made filmmaking-wise that I definitely give it a recommend if you're gonna watch all these films leading up to Dial of Destiny. But, yeah. Anyways, what did you guys think of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? Did you think the darker tone was warranted in the film, or did you think that Willie as a character worked more? I would like to see your opinion in the comment section down below. If you have any other reviews you want me to cover, please leave those in the comment sections down as well. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share the channel. I always like to see the growth of it. I really enjoy doing these in-depth reviews. And yeah, the next two reviews will be on Cocaine Bear and Creed 3. So look out for those ones. But anyways, I will see you all next time. And yes, the next in-depth review will be on Last Crusade. But that one's going to be a while till it comes out. But yeah, I'll see you then.